We're celebrating our 25th anniversary here at Christ Church, and it's got me looking back on a couple of key moments that really helped direct this great church. Moments that God used in incredible ways. And one of them was in 1994. What had happened up until 1994, between 1985 when we began and 1991, 92, 93, the church grew very, very nicely until about the early 90s, and then it just kind of plateaued. But something happened in 1994 that changed the direction of this church. I'll show you the graph this week in the call. I'll publish it so that you can see what I'm talking about. But everything changed in 1994. Lots of things happened in 1994, but one thing that I remember is that I got out an umbrella. And I held it up like this, and I preached a sermon with a red umbrella. Not this red umbrella. I don't know who this belongs to, but it's now mine. Okay? I've told you this in the past. I probably have 6 or 8 umbrellas, and I've never bought an umbrella. They're yours, okay? They're yours because what happens is that it's raining outside, and you brave the weather, you come to church, and you take your umbrella, and you walk in, and then when you leave church, it looks like this, so you forget your umbrella, and it rolls around the narthex for a year or two, and then makes it into a lost and found box, and then pretty soon, I need one, so I go to the lost and found box, and if this is an umbrella that looks familiar to any one of you, thank you very much. God bless you. But I can remember holding this up, and it was a red umbrella just like this, and asking you to see this as a metaphor, as an image that I think people held on to. And that is when we're not a believing Christian, when we're just a cultural Christian or we're not even connected to the gospel in any way, it stands out over here as an offer from God. And we're aside from it, we're away from it. But at some point in your life, many people in this room, perhaps most, have made a decision either here sitting in the pews or at a Young Life meeting or at a camp or at a retreat or something like that, maybe in a hotel or driving on the radio. You've made a decision that you accept the claims of Christ and you want Him to be your Lord and Savior. And so you are actively, and I've talked to you about this many times, you're actively moving under His Lordship and under His protection. So now whatever else goes on in this world, you don't have to worry about one thing, your eternal security. No matter what else happens, you are protected because you're under the Lordship of Christ. But it doesn't stop there. Because by the time God finds us, or we find Him, however you'd like to say it, by the time that happens, our lives are usually disintegrated. They're scattered, bits and pieces and broken parts are scattered all over. And we have our thought life over here and what we read and what we look at and the movies we watch and the language we use and our marriage and our temper and our use of money and all these things are just scattered everywhere. And the whole lifelong process of discipleship is under the power of the Holy Spirit, moving and picking up every broken piece of your life and bringing it under the Lordship of Christ. That temper that you have, that caused you to erupt at your children or with your spouse, Christ says, I want that under here. I want you to subject your emotional life, your temper, to the Lord, to my Lordship. Your language that you use, which just goes on and on, dropping all kinds of bombs wherever you go, Christ says, I want that too. Bring that under my Lordship. Your fear and your worry about your children, what will happen to them, what they will become, Christ says, bring that under my Lordship as well. They're my kids now too. One by one, by one, by one, piece by piece, all the broken elements of our disintegrated life are integrated under Christ. It's a lifelong process called discipleship, of learning to be like Christ. That's why the Apostle Paul would say to the Christians, I labor till Christ be formed in you, till you have brought all these disparate elements in your life under the Lordship of Christ. So guess what? You start to look like Christ. You start to behave like Christ. You start to think like Christ because you have the mind of Christ. So in 1994, I opened an umbrella and I invited people to put one more thing into the Lordship, and that was their resources, their money, their possessions, the material goods that pass through their hands. Because I know what happens, and I know how difficult it is as a practitioner of this. I know how difficult it is. In the ancient world, when Christians who were also soldiers became, when they were baptized, they would often, under the waters of baptism, they would take their sword and hold it out from the redeeming waters of the baptism. They didn't want the sword, to be redeemed, to be regenerated. And as in 1994, I began to see that our church was very much like this, that we had people who were under his lordship, but their resources were way out here. And just like he wants our language and our marriage and our children and our anger and our temper and all these things, he wants our resource as well brought under his lordship. This is a process of discipleship. And we need to be reminded of it continually. What happened after 1994 and this umbrella went up is that I began to see God move powerfully in this church. And you'll see when I show you this week the sort of amazing graph. But I'll tell you what, for the last 4 or 5 years, I've backed away from this. And I need to apologize for that, to you for that, because lots of reasons. Fatigue, coming out of a very conflicted denomination where we were trying to get everything right in this, trying to make the transition. I just have really not been honest with you about this central issue of the Christian faith for lots of reasons. No need to go over them now, but I need to be honest with you and say, I have neglected this. And if everything you've heard for the last 2 weeks and what you're hearing today is a surprise to you, in fact, sometimes for some of you it might be an assault, I simply say to you, this is the process of lordship living, of answering the question, if Jesus Christ is my Lord, what difference does that make in every single aspect of my life? And once you get this idea in mind, you begin to see it everywhere. You get to see it in Scriptures. In fact, I want you to turn to 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 17, and I'll show you exactly what I mean. Because this message about bringing everything under the Lordship of Christ is absolutely central to what it means to walk with Christ. I mean, you just sang it. I will worship you with all of my heart, except my money over here. I will praise you with all of my strength, except this little part of my life over here. I will seek you all my days, except Monday through Saturday, just on Sunday. That's not the way it works. To live a fully Christian, integrated life is to bring everything under his lordship. And it's that the Apostle Paul communicates to his young protege, Timothy. This passage here in the end of chapter 6, at the end of 1 Timothy, Paul, the elder, the mentor, the statesman, is communicating to his young protege about how to be a church leader. Timothy's young. We don't know how young, 20, 22, somewhere in there. He's very young. And he is needing to stand before some very influential people in his community. And Paul says to them, you need to get a couple things right with them. So he picks it up. We'll pick it up in verse 17. He says, as for the rich in this present age, and you immediately see the subtext to that phrase, don't you? As for the rich, in this present age, meaning temporarily wealthy, And incidentally, this would include everyone here in this room. As for the people who don't need to worry about where the next meal is coming from, or have a set of clothes, or a change of shoes, or a place to live, as for the wealthy in this present age. And his implication is that this present age is not going to be this present age forever. There will come a time when all of history is rolled up, or that your history or my history is rolled up. Remember a couple weeks ago, I asked you to take out your keys and to think about all the possessions that are symbolized by these keys, both real keys and imaginary keys and virtual keys, everything surrounding your life that you have possession of. In real terms, those things were given to you. You walked through life using them, and then at the end, you leave them on the table for someone else to manage as you go on to the eternal age. That's a process of life. Everybody understands that. The old joke is you don't see a hearse, which is being followed by a U-Haul. You don't see a U-Haul full of possessions on their way to the cemetery. In fact, if you look back at verse 7, look what the Apostle Paul says. For we brought nothing into this world. True enough? True enough. For we brought nothing into this world, and we cannot take anything out of this world. It's a cold, hard reality. And it's the basis of everything. When I was a young boy, I was a Boy Scout, and we'd go to these campsites, and the scout leader would get us all around, and we'd gather, and he'd say, okay, boys, here's what it is. We're going to put our tents over here. We're going to build our campfire over here, do all these kinds of things. And when we leave, we will leave. This is the motto of the Scouts. We will leave this place in better shape than when we first found it. And that was our deal. At the very end, when we all wrapped it up, we had to police everything, patrol everything, pick up every scrap of paper so that we left the place in better shape than we found it. This is the instinctive truth of what it means to be a steward. And incidentally, this is why there's so much rage in our country right now. Because we are viscerally opposed to what is the truth about our economic situation right now. That we are, in fact, burdening the next generation and the generation after that in such a way that things will not be as we found them. They'll be worse than when we found them. That's the point of all this rage in America today. It has to do with what we are, the legacy we will leave. And so Paul says to Timothy, look, tell these rich people who are rich, just rich in this present age, here's what you tell them. Verse 17, as for the rich in this present age, charge them, command them, tell them, warn them not to be haughty, puffed up, prideful, nor to set their hopes on the uncertainty of riches, but on God, who richly provides us with everything to enjoy. Here's the dividing line, Timothy. Tell people it's up to them, but you warn these people, charge these people, command these people not to be haughty, to be puffed up, to set their hopes on the uncertainty of riches, but to turn to God, set their hope on God, who gives us all things to enjoy. Enjoyment of the world, the uncertainty of riches, and the enjoyment of the things of God. Treasures on earth, treasures in heaven. And the real thing, the way this really hits the road, is that the treasures on earth don't really bring us the enjoyment that the treasures of God do.
We thank you for joining us online. The ministries of Christ Church Plano are made possible by generous contributions from our members and viewers. If you have found this sermon meaningful and would like to make a gift of support, please visit christchurchplano.org/give. Thank you.